Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're calling in from. Hi, my name is Dominique. I'm with 2Dialogue, and I am just going to give it a few minutes for people to join the call today, and we'll get started in just a couple of minutes. Thanks for waiting. All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Dominique, and I'm on the community marketing team at 2Dialogue, and I want to thank you for joining me today. We're going to be talking about 3 simple yet powerful steps to boost your conversion rates this giving season. We have an action-packed, well, I should say an information-packed 40 minutes, so I'm going to get started right away. And I don't have time at the end for Q&A, but we certainly welcome your questions, and we'll follow up with you after the session. So please feel free to forward those through the question panel, or you can reply to, most of you probably got an invitation from Jason O'Brien. Feel free to follow up with him, and I'll show his contact information at the end of the session. And I also want to extend a special welcome to our 2Dialogue clients. So thank you again for joining us, and I'm going to go ahead and get started. First of all, our agenda, this is what we're going to be covering today. I'm going to go over, for those of you who don't know us, just give you our credentials and let you know who we are and kind of where we fit in the nonprofit technology space. And then I'm going to go into the basics of why conversion and retention matters. And really it's important to understand why it's important so that if you value it and you believe in it, it is something that you will practice. And then we'll get into the 3 steps of how you can boost your conversion rates. I have a couple of case studies from some of our awesome clients, and then I'll just conclude with a quick summary of a few things that we covered today. So to begin, we're headquartered in Richardson, Texas. We have teams in New York, South Africa, and I'm based in Denver, Colorado. We were founded by nonprofit technology veterans decades ago who wanted to see a donor engagement and a donor management system that was focused holistically on supporting the multi-channel needs of nonprofit organizations. So essentially, we were actually born in a direct response agency called Stratmark, and they felt limited by the solutions their nonprofit clients were using at the time, which then was Conterra, Convio, and Blackbaud, who are obviously all now one solution. So the agency decided to build more of a direct response solution versus, an online or technology-only solution. And before we actually built a standalone product in the marketplace, we surveyed about 50 nonprofit organizations and other agencies that serve nonprofit organizations to find out what does the market really need and what do they want to see. And so some of the things we heard were that we want something that's easier to use. We want something more flexible. We don't want to be stuck using predefined templates, for example. We want freedom, flexibility to use the product the way we want to use it. And we want something that's going to support our multi-channel needs and not just our online needs. We also want something that's going to play nice with other technologies. So, if I don't want to move my CRM, I don't have to. It ideally would integrate or transfer data in and out of my other systems. And of course, we want something that's cheaper. So basically, we designed a fundraising-centric set of comprehensive solutions. And the tools were built, again, by direct response for direct response. And the goal was ultimately to provide that easy-to-use functionality that's going to support the multi-channel donor acquisition, conversion, and retention plans of nonprofits so that ultimately you can engage more easily, more efficiently, and more effectively with your constituents. Our tools are built on top of a robust CRM. Some of our clients use our CRM as their database of records, and others simply use it as a repository to collect campaign data, which then gets synced in and out of their database. So essentially, that's a little bit about us and who we are. We do have expertise from some of the legacy solutions I mentioned on staff as well. Okay, so this is just a smattering of clients that we work with. About 60% of our roadmap comes from our clients and our direct response agencies. And you'll see here that we serve some of the large global foundations down to local soup kitchens and everything in between, as well as some of the larger direct response agency in the industry. Okay. Fundraising basics, why conversion and retention matter. Again, this is important because if you don't believe it matters, you may not be willing to invest in the steps that we're going to outline after we go through the section of why it matters. Okay, so some successful fundraising strategy components. Hopefully you're using a multi-pronged approach. First off, you're focusing your efforts on acquisition of new donors. You're looking at converting those donors into ongoing supporters, cultivation of those supporters in order to retain them over time, and renewal of lapsed donors. And if you're like most nonprofit organizations, you're struggling with points 2 and 4. And number 2 is what we're really going to focus on today. The data in the next 2 slides that I'm going to be talking about was published this year by the Fundraising Effectiveness Project. And I highlighted here some of their findings as they relate to the study. They examined anonymous records of donations made by 1.8 million people. And those 1.8 million people made donations to over 2,300 profits. And so here are a couple of findings that I pulled out that I thought were really interesting. Nearly every organization, every nonprofit organization that depends on donor support could give more attention to people who gave money in the past. So if you're someone that's not focused on conversions, you're not alone. Many nonprofits experience very high turnover rates in their donor file, and ultimately that leads to higher fundraising costs because prospecting for new donors, finding, recruiting, and engaging new donors is generally costlier than maintaining connections with existing ones. Donor retention matters because only 43% of donors who gave in this particular study who gave to a specific nonprofit in 2009 gave again to the same nonprofit organization in 2010. And they didn't stop giving, they actually gave elsewhere. So if you're thinking about your donor file, and if 43% of the donors that gave to you are giving somewhere else the following year, that can really impact your bottom line. There's a silver lining though. While average donor retention rates fell during the recession, and probably everyone felt the effect of that, they've actually leveled off more recently, and some nonprofits are actually seeing much higher rates of retention year over year. So the inference there is it's very possible for more nonprofit organizations to lower attrition and increase their conversions. And if you're wondering what an average retention rate is, in this survey, nearly 2/3 of the organizations that they surveyed had retention rates between 30 and 60%. So you'll have to decide for yourself what is a good retention rate for your organization. But if you want to give more attention to encouraging that continuous support from people, those people who've made a commitment to your organization or at least have given one gift, on average 20% of your email file will leave year over year. So again, thinking back to that multi-pronged approach that we just mentioned in a previous slide, you really want to focus on donor conversion and retention to grow your file, and still paying attention to acquisition because that's obviously an important component. Okay, so how can we improve our donor conversion and retention rates? I have some bullets here from some research done by our partners at Dunham and Company, and I love, they actually used a dating analogy, which I'm going to borrow for this slide here. And they really kind of helped identify and address some of the important points about donor conversion and retention. So what they're saying is, based on their research, most nonprofits think that when a donor gives that first gift, they are a supporter of the organization, when in fact they are not. They just gave a gift. And the dating analogy that I think is so easy to relate to, it's like assuming that the person you just went out on a first date with is now madly in love with you and ready to get married. And certainly that could happen, but it's, of course, the exception and not necessarily the norm. So that's why if you want to build a serious relationship, you're going to go out on a second, a third, a fourth, and as many dates as it takes to win that person over. And that's really how it is with a donor. You need to build a pathway of multiple touch points that are going to woo that donor into making a second gift. And your ultimate goal is building a serious long-term relationship. And I'm going to really hammer that point a lot during this presentation. So the suggestion here is that you don't really have a bona fide donor until the third gift, and you only have about 6 months to gain the second gift. The donor value is higher when you acquire that second gift within 90 days, and it's actually harder to get that second gift if you wait after 90 days. Your most likely donor is the one who just gave to you, and the more personal the touch early on, the better. Multi-channel communication is going to be most effective in gaining that second gift, and I'll get into that in a few slides. Timeliness, relevance, and quality of the first gift acknowledgement is a vital driver to donor conversion and ultimate retention. So let's use that as a base. As soon as somebody gives that first gift, we want to get them into a stream with us, and I'm going to explain that more as I go through it. But don't forget, again, the value of those people who gave a first gift is higher when you can acquire that second gift within 90 days. And really what we're trying to point out here is that having a well thought out and consistently executed conversion series is going to be really important, and you actually run a high risk of wasting money on acquiring new donors if you don't have a conversion series in place prior to launching those campaigns. So you can launch your new donor acquisition campaigns, which is great, but you want to make sure that you have a conversion and a retention plan in place so that when they make that gift, you're quickly funneling them into a stream where they can continue to be motivated to give to you. So it's a really good idea to start there before you go heavy on donor acquisition, and it's just a good fundamental of any great fundraising program is really how to look at it. Okay, so where's your conversion strategy? If you think about for your organization, are you more the picture on the top, or are you more the picture on the bottom? And the picture on the top is basically just, are you kind of watering everybody at the same time? You're giving all your plants the same sunlight, the same water, the same conditions, nutrients, soil, and everything? Or, as in the second picture, are you, putting people into specific groups, and are you labeling those groups, and then are you taking care of each of those groups based on their needs? And that's really how it is with donor cultivation and ultimately donor retention. It's a careful balance between your short-term funding needs of your organization and the long-term impact of keeping a donor year after year and cultivating those relationships. I'm going to talk about it later, but studies show that those long-term donors are going to be much more valuable to your organization. So having an effective cultivation and retention strategy is going to start with understanding just how important it is to keep that donor giving year over year. And studies show that for every year you retain a donor, they become more valuable. And then if you think about your cost to convert and cultivate is not going to rise as quickly as their support does, so you're generating a greater net revenue that's going to fuel your organization. And that's ultimately the power of donor conversion and retention. There was a study conducted by the School of Philanthropy at Indiana University of more than 5,700 households over a 3-year period, and they found that the lifetime value of donors who give over multiple years is much higher. And the difference is actually pretty significant. So, this is really the understanding, the starting point for the most effective donor conversion, cultivation, retention strategy. And at a time when donor retention is kind of at an all-time low, and that's actually based on data from our friends at Blackbaud, you really can't afford to lose one donor. All right, so now that I've that we're all in agreement, we're on the same page that donor conversion and retention is important, let's talk about those steps to boost your conversion rates. And if you, for those of you that are current 2Dialogue clients, this schematic is going to look very familiar to you. This is the visual that we're going to use to illustrate the three-step process. So the first step is the engagement, the second step is the conversion, the third step is the cultivation, and I'm going to dissect each of those steps in some upcoming slides, but let's just kind of talk through this circle of life, so to speak. The engagement, whether it's email, direct mail, television, print, PR, radio, whatever it is, search engine marketing, hopefully you're using a mix of different methods of outreach, and you're using this mix to kind of engage with new and existing donors. And so in other words, you're using multi-channel communications, and you're driving people to that second step, which is the conversion. And the conversion is simply the action that you want people to take from your communication. So for example, you may want a new supporter to give a gift. You may want a repeat donor to move downstream in their relationship with you and give you more. You're ultimately trying to increase the value of the individuals in your file. And you want to create real ambassadors of your brand. And so to aid this process, you're going to want to drive people again to that one central conversion point, and you want it to be specific to where they are in their journey with your mission. And I'm going to talk through that. So we're going to get into each of these pieces one by one. But you're driving people to that landing page, that donation page, that microsite, whatever it is, to take an action. And when they get there, you want to be relevant, and you want to ideally, you're automating the content that they see or the gift amounts that they see, so that it's based on their relationship with you or their giving history with you, where they are in their journey with you. So you don't want to be speaking the same way to a long-term donor that you are to a first-time donor. So we all know that overall fundraising kind of has remained relatively flat, but online fundraising is increasing significantly. So in that second step, that conversion, you really want to take advantage of all the opportunities that you can online. You can dynamically display relevant content online to really deepen the relationship that you have with your supporters. And that certainly doesn't mean that your offline methods are not important, because they are. The third step here is the cultivation. And some of what we just talked about in the conversion step, regarding dynamic and changing content for repeat donors and what they're going to see is going to be what you're collecting in that third step. So you're collecting all that data, the actionable steps that people are taking. What are they clicking on? What types of donations? How much? All that kind of stuff. Are they registering to volunteer? What are they doing? And then in that third step, you're analyzing that actionable data from your constituents, and it's critical so that you can personalize your ongoing outreach, and that way you're keeping your organization relevant to your supporters. And that's why this is really a circle. It's not just a 1, 2, 3 step process. This is key to building long-term and mutually beneficial relationships. So really what we're trying to do here is we're trying to identify the right channel for the right audience, and we're trying to send the right message to the right audience at the right time based on where they are in their relationship with you. And we're going to get into that towards the end when we look at our case studies. All right, so let's break these steps down one by one. And I'll spend the most time really on the conversion and cultivation step. And hopefully everyone here is already implementing some key components that I'm showing you. Multi-channel is really important. You want to get people engaged with you through a multi-channel approach, because those dual donors, those multi-channel donors that give both online and offline, on average, they're 46% more, give 46% more than direct mail only donors. So if you think about how that affects your bottom line, that can be very significant. Online donors are awesome because typically they're significantly younger, they're more affluent, they're more generous than offline donors. However, they also usually make a one-time larger donation and then they disappear. And so that's why multi-channel is important. You want to get them in through an online method and then engage them and retain them through putting them into, or by putting them into, your multi-channel strategy. Your online presence and communication is also going to be a key component to the engagement. These are some of the basics. Obviously, your website is your storefront, and it should be really easy to navigate, and I'll get into that in a second too. It should be dynamic, interactive, engaging. It can be things that your online materials cannot because of the fact that it's online. Email, kind of in broader terms, is still the #1 way to stimulate online giving, but when I say in broader terms, it's more of a catalyst to drive people back to your site, and they may not necessarily give from that one email, but ultimately they are going to give. And 50% of donors receiving offline communications go online to make a gift, and I am definitely one of those people. Really, really critical component is mobile optimization. More people are reading email through mobile devices than on desktop. You probably already know that. By 2014, more internet browsing is going to happen on a mobile device than on a desktop if it isn't already. And 90% of websites out there today are not mobile optimized. So if you think of the mobile traffic that's coming now and then the traffic that's going to be coming next year, is your organization ready? And if you're not, basically you're just missing out on a really important demographic, and those people that are affluent, they're tech savvy, and they're really going to engage with your organization. And they're not really going to be able to engage with you if they can't easily access your information and move to that conversion step. And so mobile optimization is really key, even if it's just with your homepage and your donation page and your emails. Those are really the most important pieces to make sure they are mobile optimized. Excuse me. I love this slide. I don't know. It seems so easy or it seems so, I don't know, obvious. Top reasons donors give online. #1 is convenience, and #2 is because they were asked. And so if it were only that easy, and we all know it's not, but making it convenient and asking are really important steps to online giving. The top reasons donors do not give online: the giving form is too hard to find, and there's too many steps to making an online donation. So if you kind of mentally audit your giving pages, do you fall into the top reasons donors give online or that they don't give online? And you really, that is something that you want to address. That's an easy thing you can address right away. And again, mobile optimization, it's so important that I'm repeating it. Just make sure that your constituents can interact with you via their mobile device. So really the net here is that you should be driving people to one central conversion point that's very easy and convenient. Make it easy for them to take that desired action. Give them a reason to give, and then don't be afraid to ask. So let's move into the third step. Cultivation and retention, and this is really where the conversion fits into this three-step process. And this is where we're going to be spending most of the time today because it's really key to increasing your conversions. With cultivation, you need to have a plan, and that can sound scary, but it's really it's pretty simple. It's just a matter of kind of putting something in place, and you need to have a growth strategy that's going to put your donors into a stream. So when someone gives you a gift, as we saw earlier, it's really important to acknowledge that right away. Get them into a welcome series or a drip campaign. Again, ideally within 90 days, because ultimately you're trying to move them from a small first-time donor, perhaps, to a larger long-term supporter. And here's where you think about building the foundation for new relationships. Of course, some of them may not last, just like it is in the real world, but the ones that do are going to add so much value to your organization. And then you also want to make sure that you have the technology piece in place that's really going to support your strategy and your plans. And ideally, as I had mentioned earlier, you're automating most of your processes so you can focus on the analysis of the results that you're collecting and determine what's working with my outreach strategy, and use that data to insight your ongoing cultivation and your ongoing conversions, your ongoing cultivation, which is going to fuel your conversions. Unfortunately, in this fundraising effectiveness study I referenced earlier, they found that most nonprofit organizations only use 15% of their technology's capabilities. And there's a variety of reasons, why that can be happening. I mean, you may have advocacy, but you don't practice advocacy as an example. But, there is a lot of functionality in the solutions that are available today. And knowing the functionality that you have and using it to best support your strategy is going to have the biggest impact on your bottom line. And you don't really want to limit your planning because you don't know if you have functionality or you're not sure how to use the functionality of your technology. So just, making sure that you understand what you have and the power of what it can do for you. Okay, going back to the horticulture example, a donor who has only given you one gift is very different, obviously, from the donor who has given multiple gifts, especially over multiple years. So once that relationship has formed and there's a demonstrated commitment, they've demonstrated a commitment to you, again, just like a relationship, you need to really respect that and you need to nurture that relationship. For the one-time donor, again, it's not really a relationship yet. It's like you've been on one date, and so it may not work out, and that's okay. But you have to approach your cultivation with that in mind. So, again, there's other types of donors, the monthly donors, major supporters, and those who have, made a lifetime commitment to your organization through estate and legacy gifts. Everyone needs to be approached differently, and we all know that, but we need to make sure that we're practicing that. So in order to appropriately address your donors based on their demonstrated relationship with you, where they are in their relationship with you, you need to be able to effectively segment your donors into appropriate groups. So, honor the relationship that you have with the communication that you're using and make it relevant to the type of donor they are, whether it's one-time, multiple gift, monthly, major, etc. You never want to diminish the value of the data that you're capturing and use it to fuel your strategy. It's going to be more effective to communicate through various outreach channels based on, again, where people are with you in their relationship with you, and then track that so you know what's effective and what should you be repeating. So again, it's important to know and effectively target where each donor is in their journey with your organization. Okay, so fundraising communication is obviously also very critical. So whether you're sending a newsletter, a direct mail piece, you're doing television, radio, print, online communications, each of those performs a very different role, but ultimately you're giving your donor reasons why they should continue supporting your mission. And you're providing impact statements, you're sharing stories, discussing challenges, and you're asking for help. And again, all of those together are you building a relationship with your donor, and so you should be clearly presenting your donor with the opportunity to give, to invest again and again in your mission. So in the case of online communications, you also have the power to provide donors with dynamic stories. So while offline methods are also very important and they serve a specific role, there's things you can do online that you can't do offline, and you should really leverage the power to provide donors with dynamic stories. So not only through images and words, but online through video, dynamically illustrating the impact of specifically their support on your mission, because that's what people want to hear about. They want to hear success stories, and they want to know how is their support, how are you impacting the community that you serve. So hopefully you're giving them that information, and you're giving them also instant access to support you by driving them again to that centralized conversion point. So I guess you look at it like you're going to move the heart of the donor, motivate them to give right away, and make it easy for them to make that gift, and then follow up right away with an acknowledgement. So in every type of communication, also remember that testing, measuring, segmenting, and analysis are vital. And it's really not that hard to do. You just got to kind of get your system going, and once it's in place, you're going to find that you'll start seeing results, and I'll show you some of those in our case studies coming up. But in every type of communication, testing, measuring, segmenting, like I said, analysis, those are all vital, and it helps you understand what's working with your communication so that you can repeat it. So I mentioned earlier that nonprofit organizations use about 15% of the technology that they have access to, according to research. So if you're serious about developing your donors into long-term supporters, you need to be committed to some of just the basics, the fundamentals of using technology. Number one is effective database management. I think we all know this. Number two is proper segmentation, and using appropriate communication based on the type of donor with whom you're communicating. Again, the technology exists to help you do these things, and it's really going to support you through this three-step conversion process. So let's talk about some of the specific functionality that you want to consider that are really going to support your strategies before we get into a couple of case studies. So this is my last slide before we go into the case studies. First of all, you want to have a strategy in place, and you want to have technology that's going to both support that and make it easy for you. Don't let your technology be a limitation. Some things that you want to be considering when you're reviewing technology options, or when you're thinking about, what you have in place now. Is it flexible? Can both tech-savvy and non-tech-savvy people, staff, volunteers, whomever, quickly deploy email campaigns, microsites, landing pages, donation pages, especially when a compelling event occurs? So I live in Colorado. We just had some major flooding. I used to work for the local Red Cross chapter. They had to be ready, at the ready, with all their tools to get out there and leverage the PR to make sure that people are donating their episodic fundraising. Not everybody is, but certainly there are compelling reasons why you want to get out and be able to act quickly to get your donors to give. Is your online presence mobile optimized? We talked about why that's so important. Are your solutions integrated with other solutions, and can you transfer that actionable data to really just help incite your ongoing communication? So it's great if you have an effective email campaign, but the data that you're collecting, can you easily transfer that in and out of your database so that you can segment people and reach out to them through that multi-channel approach? You want to use tracking and analytics because you want to understand who, where, and how your donors are giving, and also where are they coming from. We have some of our clients that they use reference code tracking to understand, okay, are my donors coming from our PR efforts? Are they coming from our email campaigns? Where are they coming from? And then based on where they're coming from, that's where they're investing more of their marketing dollars. And so they're seeing a lot of success with that. You're going to want to segment donors into groups based on the behaviors that we talked about before, and then customize that personal communication because you want to be relevant to them, because that's going to be meaningful to your donors, and it's also going to be beneficial to you when they give more. You just want to stay relevant. Automate fundraising with personalization, with dynamic gift array, making sure that, if I'm giving $100 a month to your organization, you don't want to send me an email that asks me to give $25, $30, and $50. Gives me those options as a gift array. You want to show me larger gift arrays because you want to give me higher amounts to give to, because I already have an established giving history with you. So you want to automate some of that stuff. Can you currently accept, manage, and track transactions, registrations, donations, e-commerce, surveys, all that stuff, and really streamlining your accounting processes with your integrated payment gateways. Your accounting people will love that. What we're trying to say here is be good stewards of your donor funds. So, get your donations right away. Don't pay transaction fees, and just, be efficient with what it is with your outreach and with your resources. Okay, case study. First one, Solution Missions International, one of our clients, they help poor children worldwide academically. So globally, they're active in about 130 countries throughout 5 continents, and they operate schools, training centers, colleges, clinics, hospitals, orphanages, shelters. Really a great mission, a large organization with a really big reach. And they were not effectively segmenting their constituent behaviors into unique groups. So they were kind of just treating everybody the same. And as a result, they really weren't achieving much very effective outreach and engagements. And so they felt like they were missing out on opportunities to convert supporters into longtime donors, and certainly they were. They just didn't have an efficient way of segmenting people and cultivating those donors. And as a result, they were just kind of coming up short on a lot of their campaigns, and especially on year-end appeals. So we worked with our partners at Kirsten Direct and moved Solution Missions to the 2Dialog donor engagement platform, and they actually kept their CRM somewhere else. They They used our donor engagement platform, and that now they were able to create dynamic and customizable emails, and they could segment constituents into specific categories so they could reach out to them with customized communications. And that personalized correspondence allowed them to send unique messages to these segmented groups based on those groups' profiles. So they could leverage TwoDialogue's advanced testing, and they could test subject lines and content before sending an e-blast. So you set up like challengers and champions for those of you who've been involved with that. And so you can ensure that the high-performing or the winning message is the one that automatically gets gets distributed to the remainder of your specific mailing. So, let's say you have a 10,000 person mailing and you send out 2,000 emails, and whichever A or B, A message to 1,000, B message to 1,000, whichever one performs better is the one that automatically gets sent to the rest of your list or to that specific group. So streamlining outreach processes and just creating those more targeted, relevant messages for those specific groups really position them for a more successful year-end appeal and just for their overall online fundraising. And so the biggest win for them is that their total revenue continues to increase, and now they have the ability to effectively engage their constituents in a way that's going to be relevant to their supporters and is beneficial to their bottom line, and their results really speak for themselves. They had a 40% increase in revenue since switching to TwoDialogue and implementing a conversion strategy. Their email file size has grown 67%, 45% higher click-to-open rates after segmenting names and sending more personalized and dynamic correspondence. And so the easy-to-use advanced testing that I just mentioned really increased their outreach efficiency by about 25 to 35%. So some really strong results for solution missions. They took their data and they moved over to a conversion strategy, and then they used the tools to get some really good results. The next example that I want to show you, and the few remaining minutes that I have left, is the National Ovarian Cancer Coalition. Their mission is to raise awareness and promote education about ovarian cancer. And their online presence was really lacking, and they felt very constrained by an inflexible system, and it made changing and updating donation forms very challenging and very time-consuming. And it was a cumbersome process, and it was really hindering their online fundraising efforts and essentially holding them back during key campaigns, and again, most notably during their year-end appeals. So we partnered again with our partners at Kirsten Direct, and we helped the Ovarian Cancer Coalition create dynamic and impactful online donation forms that really overcame those key pain points that they were having. And so now these forms are easy to use for their constituents because we know that that's really important, and they're completely customizable for Knox, so they can easily change them based on the campaigns that they're running. And this form that I'm showing here, the forms that we create for them and their homepage are all built in responsive design, which basically means it will move. It's flexible. So if you look at it on a tablet or a PC, a Mac, an iPhone, whatever the vehicle is that you're using to look at the online form and at their website, responsive design will fluctuate the page according to where you're coming from. And hopefully I said that in a way that made sense. They customized their online donation forms, so now they could make it more convenient for customers or for donors than it was from their previous forms, and they could also accept and track online donations, and that was really important. So now they could also determine where these donations were coming from, and they could personalize their responses, again, based on the actionable data that they were collecting. And this was all happening in one single system. So now NOC has the ability to act on, they're a smart group of people, creative ideas, and so now they can quickly and easily build online forms for themselves, donation pages and microsites. Everything that they're envisioning, they can now do, and that helps them to better accommodate their multi-channel campaigns as well as their year-end appeals. And these forms became the central conversion points for their donors to take the desired action, and that really translated into a positive impact on their bottom line again, really positive results. End of year giving increased 98% after they moved to more of this tactical conversion strategy. They increased their email file size by 24%, and again, now they can easily, quickly, and effectively create customized pages, donation forms, etc. on the fly. And that's really aided their fundraising appeal and just all of their multi-channel outreach. So I am at the end of my session. I have last few remaining parting thoughts to leave you with. Most nonprofit organizations ultimately, I guess the point that we're trying to make, can enjoy significant financial gains if you increase some of the attention of your activities on conversion and retention and encourage long-term commitment by your donors. That stewardship, that connection with existing supporters, is not only is it less expensive than it is for acquiring new donors, it also offers you really good opportunities to communicate the value of the work that you're doing and help sustain your organization's standing in the community. And so those are really important elements for any nonprofit organization. You have a collection of donors in your database. If you don't already have a strategy for converting new and repeat donors and turning them into long-term supporters, consider what would be most effective for your organization and what the criteria is that will work best for you, and how will you bring them through the three-step donor conversion process. And then also recognize, are you ready for that, and do you have the tools necessary to really support your strategy, because those tools exist and they can definitely help you achieve your ultimate goals. And there are a lot of nonprofit organizations that are doing this. Obviously, National Ovarian Cancer Coalition and Salesian Missions are two of those, but there are so many others. So it definitely can be done, and there's absolutely room for more nonprofits to increase retention, create those conversions, increase retention, reduce attrition, and ultimately spend less on donor acquisition. And all of that's going to translate into an increased bottom line. One last note that I want to make: in that Donor Retention Matters study that I referenced earlier, they have a retention calculator that can help you calculate what your organization's current retention rate is. And all of that information is available online if you Google the Donor Retention Matters at the Urban Institute. So it's just a fascinating study, and I think everyone should have a look at it. I hope you found some useful information here today to help get your retention efforts geared up and working for you. I know Jason invited most of you to the session today, so I'm leaving you with his contact information. Please do not hesitate to contact us with any questions or for additional information. Thank you again for your time today. Thank you all also for all the important work that you do in our communities. Have a great day and have a great weekend.